Make use of the promo code LVDBF during Black Friday to get a 15% discount on Magic singles at flipsidegaming.com while supporting the channel at the same time. Hello and welcome to another Magic Arena gameplay video. Today we're taking a look at the Strength in Number starter deck. First off, we'll take a look at the deck list and play a game with the deck without making any changes to it out of the box. And then afterwards, I'll show you how I would personally gradually upgrade the deck. We'll go over all those gradual changes, and then we'll play some games with the fully upgraded deck as well. So first off, let's take a look at the deck list. Strength in Numbers is a red-white, go-wide creature aggro deck that's looking to get on the board quickly and then close out the game with one of its many pump spells. We've got one copy of Make a Stand, giving all our creatures +1/+0 and indestructible until end of turn. We've got two copies of Trumpet Blast, giving all attacking creatures +2/+0. We've got a copy of Inspire Charge, giving all creatures we control +2/+1 until end of turn. And then of course 3 copies of Heroic Reinforcements, which is a big one, making 2 1/1 soldier creature tokens, and until end of turn, creatures we control get +1/+1 and gain haste, which is a great finisher. So let's take a look at our entire deck list, starting out with our 1-drops, where we sadly only have 3 copies of Legion Vanguard, 1 mana for a 1/1 that at the beginning of combat on our turn, if we control 3 or more creatures, the Vanguard gets +1/+1 until end of turn and we gain 1 life. Next up in the 2-drop slot, we've got 2 copies of Cavalry Drillmaster, 2 mana for a 2/1. When it enters battlefield, a creature gets +2/+0 and first strike until end of turn. We've got 2 copies of Martyr of Dusk, 2/1, that when it dies makes a 1/1 life-linking vampire token. We've got 3 copies of Goblin Instigator, 2 mana for a 1/1 that spawns a 1/1 goblin creature token, so helps us go wide and make use of those mass pump spells. We've got 3 copies of Lightning Strike as a cheap removal spell, that can also go to the face to finish off an opponent. One of our rares is Kinjali's Sunwing, 3 mana for a 2/3 flyer, that says creatures your opponent control enter the battlefield tapped, so will make it easier to keep attacking. Then we've already seen Make a Stand. We also have a Mentor of the Meek as our only real card draw engine in the deck, 3 mana for a 2/2, that says whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, we can pay 1, and if we do, we get to draw a card. And of course, almost every card in our deck will trigger the Mentor to let us draw an extra card. Then we've got 3 copies of Militia Bugler, which is a 3 mana 2/3 with Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, we can take a look at the top 4 cards of our library. We can reveal a creature card with power 2 or less from among those and put it into our hand, and the rest goes on the bottom. So this can also be a nice 2-for-1 if we have enough creatures we can find with it. Then we also have a 1-off Act of Treason, which can also randomly win us a game, stealing one of the opponent's creatures until end of turn, so we can attack with it and also get rid of a blocker at the same time. We've got 2 copies of Boggart Brute, 3 mana for a 3/2 with Menace. Then we've already seen our Trumpet Blasts, got 2 of those. We've got 2 copies of Harromancer's Cage as another removal spell that can exile an opposing non-land permanent, so can also get rid of creatures, planeswalkers, artifacts, you name it. Then we've also got the 1-off Inspire Charge. Then we also have a Leonin Warleader as another powerful rare, 4 mana for a 4/4 creature, and when the Warleader attacks we get to make 2 cat creature tokens with lifelink that will also be tapped and attacking, so also helps us with the go wide plan. We also have 2 copies of Paladin of the Bloodstained, 4 mana for a 3/2 that makes a 1/1 lifelinking vampire token, so also puts multiple bodies into play. We've got a Captivating Crew as a 4 mana 4/3, and for a 3 and a red we can steal one of the opponent's creatures until end of turn. Then we've got our Heroic Reinforcements, 1 copy of Siege Gang Commander, which also makes 3 1/1 red goblin creature tokens when it enters the battlefield, and for 1 and a red we can sacrifice any goblin, including the Siege Gang Commander itself, to deal 2 damage to any target, so also plays well with the 2 mana Goblin Instigator that makes 2 goblins essentially. And then last but not least, 1 copy of Burning Sun's Avatar, 6 mana for a 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 3 damage to an opponent or planeswalker and 3 damage to up to 1 target creature. And then we've got 24 lands, 10 plains, 9 mountains. 1 Clifftop Retreat enters untapped if we control a plains or mountain, and 4 Stone Quarries that always enters the battlefield tapped. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into a game and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw with a reasonable opening hand. We've got some 2-drops, a Sunwing on 3, and then if we draw some more lands we can play a Siege Gang Commander, which is pretty powerful in combination with the Goblin Instigator. Opponent leads with Is It Guildgate, so some sort of blue-red deck. So turn 2, probably just going to lead with the Instigator, so we can make use of the Drillmaster's ability later in the game. Alright, Reinforcements is a good pickup. But next turn we're probably playing the Sunwing. Opponent with an Opt. So they might be playing some of the Drake cards, either Enigma Drake or Crackling Drake or both. Which is why they're playing all these cheap instants and sorceries to fuel the graveyard. Alright, let's play the Sunwing. I guess we can attack first. That way if our opponent is holding a removal spell, there's a small chance they kill one of our Goblin tokens instead of the Sunwing, which is more valuable. They might also be holding a counterspell, like an Acid Scatter, but doesn't seem to be the case. And also no Lightning Strike end of turn. Alright. Let's see what they've got. 4 mana total, and it's going to be a Crackling Drake, which luckily enters the battlefield tapped thanks to the Sunwing, but draws the opponent a card. Alright, so we could just play Heroic Reinforcements here, which seems pretty good. Better than the alternatives. Get in a nice big chunk of damage. And next turn we can pump up our tokens with the Trumpet Blast. And it's gonna be Shock taking out one of our tokens. That's okay. And a Beacon Bolt to finish off the Sunwing. Alright, so that set us back quite a bit. But here we should be able to just finish off our opponent by attacking with everyone, casting Trumpet Blast after attacking. Gotta make sure that you're attacking before you cast your Trumpet Blast, otherwise it doesn't do much. And this gets us in for 6 damage with our tokens, and then Lightning Strike can finish them off. Sweet. So nice aggressive start, and Heroic Reinforcements doing a ton of damage there. Alright, now that we got to see the deck in action, it's time to upgrade the deck, and there's lots of different ways we could upgrade the Strength in Numbers deck, just because there's such a multitude of different white 1-drops we could play, and they'll push you in slightly different directions. You could end up with a mostly mono-white deck, just splashing red for Heroic Reinforcements. There's even some versions out there that don't even play the Heroic Reinforcements, and instead just have red in their mana base to support some sideboard cards, if you're playing best of 3. But we're going to try and stay true to the main theme of the deck, so we'll try to maximize on the power level of Heroic Reinforcements, since in the game we just played we could see that Reinforcements can be a super powerful card. So that's what we'll try to achieve here as we slowly upgrade the deck. And there's some good news, since you can make some immediate adjustments to the deck without having to spend any wild cards, since there's some nice red and white cards you could get from the other starter decks. So if you've got all the starter decks, you can make some immediate improvements to the Strength in Numbers deck. In the green-white starter deck, Auras of Majesty, you get access to 1 copy of History of Benalia, which is a great card for the deck, which we will definitely add a full 4 copies of as we start to add some Mythic wildcards to the deck, but for now we get to add 1 copy to the deck for free, and that can easily replace one of the other 3-drops like the Boggart Brute. Then in the black-white starter deck, Eternal Thirst, you get access to 3 copies of Ajani's Pridemate, which synergizes quite nicely with our 3 copies of Leonin Vanguard, which gains us life and then will help us grow the Pridemate. And we've got some other lifelink creatures in the deck as well, so we can add 3 copies of Pridemate to the deck from the Eternal Thirst deck, and we can easily cut the Drill Master and maybe 1 Martyr of Dusk to make room for it. And in the same starter deck, there's also an additional copy of Leonin Warleader, which we can add to the deck. And in the mono-white starter deck, Tactical Assaults, there's also 1 copy of Leonin Warleader, so you should have 3 copies of Leonin Warleader if you've got all these starter decks unlocked, and we can easily cut the Paladin of the Bloodstained to make room for the 2 Warleaders, which should be an improvement. And finally, you can add the 4th copy of Goblin Instigator, which should be in the black-red starter deck, Chaos and Mayhem, so you should have all 4 copies of Goblin Instigator without having to use any wild cards, and we can cut the Martyr of Dusk to make room for it, for example. So those are some immediate improvements without having to spend any wildcards. The Ajani's Pridemate and Leonin Vanguard package is just going to be a placeholder for the time being, since in the final build of the deck we're not going to have this small life gain sub-theme, and instead we're going to opt for a more go-wide plan that plays better with the Heroic Reinforcements, but the Pridemate is totally serviceable for the time being. Alright, now it's time to bust out the wildcards. So first off I'll go over all the commons we want to add to the deck, and then I'll do the same with the uncommons, the rares and the mythics. So the first common we want to add to our deck is 4 copies of Hunted Witness, 1 mana for a 1/1, that when it dies leaves behind a 1/1 soldier token with lifelink. So not the most powerful card, but it does work out quite well with our game plan of having as many creatures in play as possible by the time we play our reinforcements. So even in the face of removal spells or sweeper effects, the Witness will leave behind a body, and it also helps us lower our curve, so we'll have as many creatures in play as possible by the time we play the reinforcements. And for what it's worth, while we have the small life gain sub-theme with Pridemate, Vanguard, and Warleader, the Witness also leaves behind a lifelinking token, which can potentially help us grow the Ajani's Pridemate. So by adding 4 copies of Hunted Witness, we'll need to make some cuts to make room for them, and we'll end up cutting the Burning Sun's Avatar, since at 6 mana it's quite expensive, and is also a little bit out of place in this deck, and the triple red in mana cost can also be prohibitive. So we'll cut that one. Captivating Crew is also a little bit clunky and expensive to use in this deck. We'll try to be a much lower curve deck, so we don't really have time to pay 4 mana for the activated ability. Plus it's also not the most synergistic card since we can't find it with the Militia Bugler, so we'll cut the Captivating Crew even though it is an okay card. And we'll also cut the Bogger Brute since it's not a great card, also can't find it with the Militia Bugler. And we'll also cut the Act of Treason, which is also a little bit out of place in this deck, even though it can sometimes help us get rid of a big blocker and get in a big chunk of damage, but maybe it's more of a sideboard card against the big green decks. So we're back to 60 cards, and now it's time to add some uncommons to the deck. The first uncommon we want to add to the deck, of course, is an additional copy of Heroic Reinforcements, and we can easily cut the Inspired Charge for it, which is a similar card as it also pumps the team, but at least the reinforcements also put some additional creatures in play. Then the next uncommon we want to add to the deck is 3 copies of Conclave Tribunal, which has the same effect as the Hieromancer's Cage, but it also has Convoke, so we can tap some of our creatures to help us cast the Conclave Tribunal, which can be very useful. So we'll add 3 of those, and of course we can cut the 2 copies of Hieromancer's Cage to make room for it. And I can also cut 1 copy of Lightning Strike, since we've added an additional removal spell to the deck. Then the next uncommon we want to add to our deck is 3 copies of Pride of Conquerors, 2 mana for an instant with Ascent, which means that if we resolve the Pride of Conquerors, if we have 10 or more permanents in play, we get to gain the City's Blessing for the rest of the game, and then creatures we control get +1/+1 until end of turn, but if we have the City's Blessing, those creatures get +2/+2 until end of turn instead, so potentially a very powerful pump spell for just 2 mana. And of course, since we're making so many tokens with all our cards, it's very likely that we'll get to City's Blessing by the time we want to cast our Pride of Conquerors. So by adding 3 Pride of Conquerors, we can cut some of the other mass pump spells. So we can cut the Trumpet Blasts, and we can cut the Make a Stand. Even though Make a Stand has a bit of utility against sweeper effects, it's kind of awkward to have to keep up 3 mana against a sweeper anyway, so we might want to put this one in the sideboard instead. And our next uncommon will be Adanto Vanguard, 2 mana for a 1/1, that as long as it's attacking gets +2/+0, so attacks as a 3/1, and we can pay for life to make the Adanto Vanguard indestructible until end of turn, so it's another nice sticky threat that we can keep in play through a sweeper effect and through removal spells to make sure we have enough creatures in play by the time we cast our Heroic Reinforcements. So Adanto Vanguard is a perfect fit for the deck, and we can add all 4 copies. And now is probably the time where we can cut some of the life gain sub-theme in the deck, so we no longer need the Ajani's Pridemates. And the final uncommon we want to add to our deck is Skymarcher Aspirant as a 1 mana 2/1 with Ascent as well, and the Aspirant has flying as long as we have the City's Blessing, so also plays nicely with our Pride of Conquerors and just adds another nice 1-drop to the deck. So because we've added all these 1-drops to the deck and we've lowered the curve of the deck, we can afford to cut 1 land, and by cutting a land we probably don't want to be playing a 5-drop, so even though Siege Gang Commander is a powerful card, he can go, and so can one of the Leonine Warleaders. And then the final 2 cuts will be the 2 Lightning Strikes. Now it's time to add some rares to our deck, and the first rare we want to add is 4 copies of Legion Warboss, 3 mana for a 2/2 with Mentor, so when the Warboss attacks, if there's another attacking creature with lesser power, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on that attacking creature, and at the beginning of combat on our turn, we get to make a 1/1 a red goblin creature token. That token gains haste until end of turn and attacks this combat if able. So of course, once the Legion Warboss starts attacking, we can simply mentor onto one of the 1/1 attacking goblin tokens to make it into a 2/2. So if the Warboss does not get answered immediately, it can very quickly get out of hand and kind of win the game by itself. And of course, making a bunch of tokens plays well with our go wide plan with Heroic Reinforcements. So we'll add all 4 copies of Legion Warboss to our deck. And to make room for Legion Warboss, we can cut the Kinjali Sunwing, and then we can also cut the Militia Buglers. And then the next rare we will add to our deck is 3 copies of Legion's Landing, 1 mana for a legendary enchantment, and when the landing enters the battlefield we get to make a 1/1 vampire token with a lifelink, and if we attack with 3 or more creatures we get to transform Legion's Landing into Adanto the First Fort, which can also make additional 1/1 tokens at the cost of 3 additional mana. So very powerful enchantment, and also helps us put 2 permanents in play that count towards the City's Blessing with Ascend, so plays very well with our Skymarcher Aspirant and our Pride of Conquerors. So we can add 3 copies of Legion's Landing, and we can make room for it by cutting the Leonin Vanguards. And now it's time to complete our playset of History of Benalia, spending 3 mythic wildcards. And even though Mentor of the Meek can provide some extra cards, we're trying to win the game as fast as possible, so we shouldn't really need to draw extra cards. So we can cut the Mentor, and then we can also cut the 2 remaining Leonin Warleaders. Even though they're powerful, we do have to untap with them before they do anything. They can be quite vulnerable to opposing lava coils. And now all that's left to do is to improve the mana base a little bit, so we can add additional copies of Clifftop Retreat. And we can also add 4 copies of Sacred Foundry as an additional dual land, and especially in these aggressive decks you want to make sure not to have too many tap lands, since you want to be curving out, and Sacred Foundry especially lets us play our white 1-drops on turn 1, even at the cost of 2 life it's worth it. And then we can cut the Stone Quarries. And Sacred Foundry also counts as both a mountain and a plains, so Retreat will come into play untapped if we control Sacred Foundry, or a basic plains or a basic mountain. So we can cut 3 mountains here, which still gives us a total of 13 red sources, which should be enough to help us cast our single red cards in the deck on time. So that rounds out our main deck. Now it's time to take a look at some options for the sideboard if you're interested in playing best of 3s. So one card you could definitely add to the sideboard, since we're playing red and not just splashing it, is 4 copies of Lava Coil as a nice removal spell, dealing 4 damage to a creature and also exiling it. So we can have all 4 copies of Lava Coil if we want to. Then we could also add some copies of the Honor Guard to help us against the Golgari decks that have a lot of creatures with Enter the Battlefield abilities, so we could even add all 4 copies of Honor Guard if we felt so inclined. Then we could also consider playing some copies of Aurelia as a card to go bigger after opponent brings in some cheap removal spells, maybe some sweeper effects like Deafening Clarion. We can go a little bit bigger by bringing in Aurelia, which can also win the game by herself. So we'll add 2 copies of Aurelia, and she can also be quite good in the mirror match. And our game plan against control decks is to bring in 4 copies of Experimental Frenzy, which can take over the game by itself as well. And we can also consider 1 copy of Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants, giving us an alternate angle of attack, boosting up our creatures, and eventually ultimating to also help us close out the game. And that pretty much rounds out the sideboard, but there's many more options that you could consider. Then taking a look at our basic lands, they look pretty good. So I don't think we need to change those, but we can change the picture to Heroic Reinforcements. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand's decent, not perfect, since unfortunately we can't play the Legion's Landing on turn 1 since we don't have the untapped white source, since we have 2 Clifftop Retreats, but still a keepable hand for sure. Get to play turn 2 either Instigator or Vanguard, turn 3 History of Benalia, and then the turn after maybe we can go Landing plus Instigator, we'll see. Alright, might as well play the tapped Clifftop Retreat, but it doesn't really matter here. Alright, find an Aspirant, so I think we still want to play one of our 2-drops here, and I think I'll lead with the Adanto Vanguard. As it hits a little bit harder. Opponent on green-black and Druid of the Cowl, so the Adanto Vanguard can attack into it for now. Alright, let's attack for 3. And then play one of our histories, and now that we drew a second copy, playing the first one is going to be even better. So our opponent on some sort of Golgari mid-range deck. We'll have to keep Find Finality in mind as a powerful sweeper effect. Vraska's not bad. It's gonna go after the history. But we can just finish off Vraska with one of our attackers here. Alright, so we've got a few options. We could play another history, which seems okay here. Could also opt to instead play more small creatures. We could play Instigator plus Landing, or Instigator plus one of our other 1-drops, and then maybe threaten to transform Legion's Landing next turn. but I think I still prefer playing another History. And then can finish off Vraska, deal 3 to our opponent. And then next turn we can maybe play Legion's Landing and transform it, which would also give us a bit of extra mana. Alright, opponent playing some mana creatures. So they could potentially cast something pretty powerful next turn, like a Carnage Tyrant or a Find Finality. Reinforcements was a good pickup. So if we do transform Legion's Landing, we'll have access to 4 mana next turn for reinforcements. So it might be worth it to kind of sacrifice one of our Knight tokens and trade it for Llanowar Elves, just to be able to transform the Legion's Landing. So let's play it here. Attack with everyone. Transform the landing. And then we can still play some more stuff in our second main phase. Opponent does not go for the double block, which indicates that they might be holding a Find Finality they want to cast or Carnage Tyrant, which they need the Llanowar Elves for. So it would be a little bit risky to play more stuff into a Find Finality here, since next turn we might have enough with just the Heroic Reinforcements. But I guess it's okay to play Hunted Witness, since even if that one dies, it leaves behind a token. But I don't think we overextend by playing the Instigator, even though we could. Since next turn we also have the 3rd chapter from History happening. Alright, it's just going to be a Vivian, which could destroy the History here.
Let's tear this place apart.
But that's okay. And I'm pretty sure the Heroic Reinforcements is going to be lethal here. Alright. Alright, sweet, and we can even play Aspirant before playing the Reinforcements, as the Aspirant will also gain haste, so we can also attack if we want to. And yeah, we can just send everyone at our opponent, which should be more than enough. Alright, sweet, so managed to beat the black-green midrange. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand's pretty good. Can curve 1, 2, 3, and then hope to top deck Reinforcements at some point. Opponent with turn 1 Island, could be the mono blue deck as well. We're just gonna play the Aspirants. And then next turn we're probably just gonna play the Adanto Vanguard into History of Benalia. Alright, it's a blue-red deck instead, so it could be a Drake deck or maybe a blue-red control deck. We're just gonna get in for 2. And then we'll play the Adanto Vanguard, I think. Resolves, and Adanto Vanguard, once it's in play against the blue-red deck, they'll have a pretty difficult time dealing with it. Opponent goes for a blink of an eye to bounce it, that's okay. So next turn we could play History. If we want to play around a counterspell, we could go 1-drop plus 2-drop instead. And pick up another Hunted Witness, so not entirely sure what our opponent is up to here. If they're holding a counterspell, I would prefer not to play the 3-drop into it. So let's start by attacking for 2, since that's not gonna change. And if they do decide to use a removal spell on Aspirant, then we get to resolve History. Alright, I think we'll take 2 from Sacred Foundry. Then we can play Adanto Vanguard, which gets ionized, and then a Hunted Witness. Could have also played Hunted Witness first, and then maybe played Instigator instead of Vanguard, but let's say our opponent then has a Fiery Cannonade to deal 2 damage to all non-pirates. We get punished. Opponent just cast a Chart of Course there, discarding a land. Alright, let's start by attacking. The Skymarcher already dealt 4 damage, and it's gonna be 6 now. And what to do now? We could just play the History. Opponent would need a Negate or a Syncopate for 1 to be able to counter it. I think I tried here. Since, of course, Acid Scatter doesn't work. History resolves. And our opponent with a Lightning Strike to take out the Knight token. Alright, so our opponent was patient there, since they might have had an Acid Scatter in hand that they wanted to keep up. which is why they didn't just kill the Skymarcher Aspirant with a lightning strike before damage. Opponent with another Charter Course discards Siren Storm Tamer, so now we see Enigma Drake, which we don't have an answer for. We're not holding one of our tribunals, so it's going to be a pretty big roadblock here. And here we can either play the Warboss or we can go Hunted Witness plus Instigator, and I think I prefer going Witness plus Instigator since next turn we're likely to play the Pride of Conquerors, so we would rather have more creatures in play guaranteed. And I'm not gonna make any attacks here. But next turn the Pride of Conquerors is gonna be very important to help us close out the game. Opponent's got a Lightning Strike, so had we played Legion Warboss it would have just died to the Lightning Strike. Enigma Drake now 7 powered, but our opponent only has 1 card left in hand. And if that's not a counterspell for the Pride of Conquerors, we'll be in a good spot. Sadly, we're 1 mana away of being able to cast everything, since we could play the Warboss, play the landing transforms, and then if we had 1 more mana we could still cast the Pride of Conquerors before damage. Sadly, that's not the case, so we can only play landing plus Pride. I think that's still okay though. So we'll attack with everyone. Flip the Legion's Landing. Opponent blocks Aspirant, and now we can Pride of Conquerors and hope it resolves. It does. So our opponent's down to 1, and we managed to trade Aspirant for the Drake. Opponent's got a Crackling Drake, but that's not going to be good enough here, since we can just attack with everyone. Even in the event where opponent had a sweeper, the Hunted Witnesses would have given us enough creatures to be able to kill our opponent. Sweet. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand looks quite good. Got a nice 1, 2, 3, 4 curve. Don't have any interaction. Opponent appears to be on perhaps the mono-white build of the deck, so this will be an interesting game. If we can hit our 4th land drop, then we've got a very powerful curve here, but our opponent does have Healer's Shock plus a Ajani's Pridemate, which is something we also had in the deck for a while. Of course not the Healer's Shock, but that's also a card you could consider as one of the many other 1-drops in the deck. Alright, so don't have any great attack with the Hunted Witness sadly, but we'll just play Adanto Vanguard here I think over Instigator. Legion's Landing. So our opponent with a lot of life gain here, which is going to be annoying. And the Pridemate gets in there. Don't think we have to chum block it with the Hunted Witness quite yet, so we'll just take 4. Alright, history. So we could play History of Benalia if we wanted to. Could play a Legion Warboss, which gets to make a 1/1 token, which does get to attack here, which is pretty nice. I think I prefer that over the history, although it's close. Could also go Instigator plus another Hunted Witness. But I think we want to go with the Warboss. The sooner we get it in play, the better. And then I don't think we want to attack with the Hunted Witness, since I want to keep it back to block the Pridemate. Opponent takes 4. Gets to transform Legion's Landing. So we'll chum block the Pridemate. We could also block the 1/1 token if our opponent has a Pride of Conquerors and uses their entire turn to trade for a Warboss. I think that's okay. Alright, damage happens. Pridemate grows even more. But the Hunted Witness can chum block it for quite a while. And they've got a history as a follow-up. Alright. So good start from our opponent. We had a decent draw as well. And there's a Pride of Conquerors, which is going to be key in this game. So let's go to attackers. And I think we just attack with everyone here. Sadly, we were one permanent short of having Thasidi's Blessing if we played Hunted Witness before attackers. We still would have only had 9 permanents in play. Opponent trades for the Warboss, that's acceptable. Even though we could play Pride of Conquerors, we're going to set up a bigger Pride of Conquerors next turn. So here we could either go Hunted Witness plus Instigator or play History. I think we'll go Hunted Witness plus Instigator. That way we get to chum block Theogani's Pridemate and then hopefully have a lethal attack next turn. Alright, another History. Pridemate and Hawk attack. Nope, Pridemate's gonna stay back this time, so we'll just take one. And we found a land, so we can actually play the Heroic Reinforcements instead of the Pride of Conquerors, so let's do some math. Let's say our opponent blocks our 3 biggest guys, which would be Vanguard, the 2/2, and then one of our 1/1s. We still have 4 creatures getting through for damage, so 4 times 3 is 12, so we would be 2 points short of killing our opponent with the Pride of Conquerors. And with the Heroic Reinforcements we have 6 creatures getting through for damage, which adds up to the same total. So it's pretty close here what to do. I think we go for the Reinforcements just because it adds 2 creatures to the board for next turn for the Pride. So let's send in everyone, and gotta make sure we don't die on the way back, but our opponent is forced to make some trades here with the Knight tokens, so I don't think they'll be able to kill us on the way back. So our opponent is forced to block 3 creatures, otherwise they're dead. We can't afford to make Vanguard indestructible here, I don't think, otherwise we would drop to 9. Yeah, that's a bit too risky, so we'll let damage happen. Opponent falls to 2. We also gain 3. And we should still have enough permanents in play for a lethal Pride of Conquerors next turn, so we will see what happens here. Opponent gets 1 more Knight token from History. And our opponent scoops it up, so they couldn't even beat what we had in play, but we still had a Pride of Conquerors coming up as well to help us close out the game. Sweet, so we managed to beat the mono-white variant of the deck. And yeah, you could see in those games how Pride of Conquerors and Heroic Reinforcements often made the difference, being a powerful pump spell to help us close out a game. And that's also gonna close out today's video. Feel free to let me know in the comments which deck we should upgrade next. But for now, I wanna thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. And as always, have a nice day. I also wanna thank all my patrons for being part of the channel, and you can become a patron yourself today and decide the topic of future videos over at patreon.com/LegenVD.